I forgot to divide by 7. That's all it was, Bernard. Oh, we're already taping. Sorry. Oh, good evening. My name is Professor Martin Billingsly. I teach economics and statistics at Oxford, and I'm so happy that I can be with you tonight. I'm actually sorry that I can't be there in person as I'd planned. It seems my wife, Catherine, has advanced to the semi-finals in the Wheelsleydale semi-annual croquet tournament. I just have to be there to cheer her on. I'm so excited. But through the wonders of modern technology, you and I are still able to... Actually, I'm doing all the talking and you're doing all the listening. But nonetheless, if you do have questions, there is a way to reach me during office hours, 3 to 5 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, on to what I'd hoped to share with you tonight in person. It's the result of some research that I and several graduate students had been working on diligently for the last 3 months. Now we finally think we have it. It is a mathematical model that puts into somewhat quantifiable terms the worthiness of God to be worshipped. Now, yes, it's rather difficult to put an exact number. We realize the inaccuracies in the mathematical model. I mean, it's a lot like economics. But nonetheless, it lets us begin to get our arms around how worthy God really is for our worship and praise. Without further ado, let's look at the model. Now, we've called the term W sub W the Worship Worthiness Index. This is the worthiness of God to be worshipped and praised by His creation. Yes. Now, we found something that rather startled us at the beginning, and that is the very small number of variables that are actually used in this equation. First of all, the terms, you would say, are limited to 2. The first, G sub R1, G sub R2, and G sub R3. Each of these terms being a rating of God's wonderful character qualities on a scale of 1 to 10. Each one of those qualities, for instance, His faithfulness to be with us time and time and time again. His love, which is poured out on His creation so abundantly. Obviously, He's always scoring 10s there. So, these 10s are summed in the numerator, and in the denominator we have the inverse of the total summation of the number of terms. So, raised to the 76.4 power. Now, one could argue that this term is infinite. However, for the sake of our model, we have chosen to look at this term as being finite, albeit very, very large. Now, on to the next term in the equation. In the numerator, f r sub 1, f r sub 2, and f r sub 3 are a rating of man's lack of good character qualities on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being a minor failure, and 10 being a total failure in his moral rectitude, if you will. Now, these individual terms might be his tendency to harbor bitterness when injured, or his inability to show love toward his enemies. Yes. So, always scoring here, very high as well, with a big failure term, as it were. Summed the total number of those poor character qualities, raised to the 214 power, this term as well is very large. Now, the fascinating thing is the relationship of these terms, that they're even in the same equation, and that they have a multiplicative relationship. That is, God's worthiness to be worshipped by itself should drive us to that. We should recognize His mercy, His forgiveness, His love, His power, His wisdom. That alone should drive us to worship, draw us to worship. However, when we put alongside it, as it were, this term here, our failures, that God would still extend mercy, to a failing people, that God would still show love to a very unlovely people. Well, this term, W sub W, goes through the roof. Yes, which is what we'd suspected all along. But now we have a quantifiable, numeric concept that this term is so large that he deserves all that we can give him. And we run into a limitation here. This number is so very large. It's just impossible for this 3.5 pounds of grey matter to get its arms around it. So, we will do what the Apostle Paul suggested doing in the letter to the Corinthians. He said, I will worship God with my mind and with my spirit. He knew that only a part of this worship that God is due could be conceived by the mind, and that the rest would have to come out of a full spirit, worshipping in spirit and truth, as Jesus said, an overflowing heart filled with the Spirit of God to testify of his wonders and goodness. So, I suppose we can follow Paul's fine example and the conclusions of our research and realize we need to worship God with our mind and with our spirit. Well, listen, if you have any further research of your own that you've done in this topic and wish to submit that to us, do get that off to us quickly, and we'll incorporate it in before we publish the paper. Office hours again are 3 to 5 p.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Happy to talk more with you about the Worship Worthiness Index. It's been a pleasure to be with you tonight, and I really must be off. She's about to tee off, so God bless, and worship with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength.